Welcome to the latest edition of Circling the Bases. I'm DJ Short, and with me here once again is Scott Pianowski from Yahoo. We're live on Twitch this afternoon, so thanks for those hanging out with us over there. And if you're listening in podcast form or watching later on YouTube, we're recording Monday afternoon, coming out of another interesting weekend of MLB action. No shortage of storylines to get into here, Scott. Unfortunately, at the top here, a bunch of them will be injuries, which we never like to see.
Yeah, I settled in Sunday. Going to watch the Masters. Going to watch baseball. I've had the TV on for 5 minutes, and Oneil Cruz is writhing in pain at home plate. Nobody likes to see that. He's a young ascending talent for a Pirates team that got off to a hot start. Not that we can take that much from 8 or 9 games, but I mean they had been playing really well, and he's their signature guy, right? He's the guy.
Yep.
Ostensibly they're building around. Broken ankle. He's already had surgery on the ankle, but we're talking about maybe 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and that might even be optimistic. So, and I know we're going to try to get people some replacements for Oneil Cruz. I thought shortstop was a deep position during draft season, but I was kind of disappointed when I was looking through what might be available for people. And I'm going to give out some names that I'm sure people are going to be like, I can't get him. He's long gone. But I'm going to try to help, and I know you're going to have some ideas too. But for a position I thought was deep a month ago or 2 weeks ago, it's funny how in season that stuff dries up.
Right. Good call. Good call. So before we get into that, just a reminder, every season is draft season. Get your Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts packed with profiles, rankings, projections. Order today and get all 3 Rotoworld Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BERRY, BERRY, and save an extra 20% at checkout. Again, that's promo code BERRY. And get that Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today. We're approaching NFL Draft. Then, before you know it, it'll be training camp. So get set, and we can definitely help you out there. So, Scott, you mentioned the Oneil Cruz thing. I was just weird, too. Like the slide, I guess, if you want to call that, into home plate, it looked like he just got caught in between. It was more of like a slide slash stumble into home plate. But it's a shame, not just for fantasy players, but also Pirates fans who haven't had a lot to cheer for in recent seasons. Cruz was, saying in spring training he was aiming for like a 30-30, 40-40 type of season. I don't know if we were going to see that, but certainly one of the most exciting young players in the game. So even just from a baseball perspective, certainly disappointing to see that. So internal replacement in Pittsburgh for Cruz, Rodolfo Castro, likely the regular option there. Castro appeared in 71 games last year, hit 233, 11 homers, 725 OPS, 5 steals, and 8 attempts. Actually amounted to a 102 OPS plus, so he's above average hitter, but prone to the strikeout for sure, even in the minors, low on base percentage, but a young hitter, 23 years old. There's some juice there. I don't know about him. Your standard mixed league 10-12 team, you're probably not looking at Castro, but NL only, deeper mixed, I could see maybe taking a chance on Castro.
Yeah, I think you outlined it well. At least there's a little bit of category juice there, and we know the playing time is going to be his, for about 3 months. So in the deeper formats, you could do worse, because the guys we're going to mention for the shallower mixed leagues are going to be long gone to you. So, and the other thing with Castro is because he wasn't playing, because he was blocked by Cruz, I mean, he's available everywhere. So he's the type of guy that in those NL only formats or in those really deep mixed leagues with big benches, he's the type of guy you might look at.
Yeah, so let's get into some of these other alternatives. And you said already, the field of I was just looking strictly at middle infielders. Like, let's say you need to fill that. Even that is kind of underwhelming. Bryson Stott, who's off to a decent start. Gene Segura, who can fill up some categories. John Birdie, I think, is somewhat interesting. Joey Wendell's on the injured list with an oblique injury right now, so Birdie should play a bunch in that Marlins infield, and we know what he can do when he plays. He runs, and especially a season like this, he may run every chance he gets. So I don't know. I kind of like Birdie maybe as a short term fill in there. You should try to piece it together, but I'm wondering what you're seeing too.
Yeah, I'll first offer the cheat code pick. If we go over, usually 50% is our cutoff. I
Yep.
was really surprised that Nico Horner, if I have it right, is only 51% rostered in Yahoo.
Oh,
I thought I would have guessed he would have been 70 or 80%.
yeah, he should be.
So there's somebody who I think might be available in some of the shallower formats. The more competitive leagues, obviously he's around gone. I had Stott on my list. It's been mostly batting average. It hasn't been category juice for him, but he's a guy who
Yeah,
showed there was at least a case to be made for him that he was an ascending talent into this season. So I could see maybe picking up him. Brian Turang has been better than I expected in Milwaukee, showing good plate discipline. He's got some walks. He puts contact on the ball, and he's got playing time in Milwaukee. So he's a guy you could look at. I'll also say I liked Elvis Andrews. I know it was hard to reconcile who Elvis Andrews was because he was terrible in Oakland last year, and then he went to
yeah,
Chicago with White Sox. He was terrific for about a quarter of a season. He's off to a really bad start, and his roster tag is down to 17%. I'm not willing to give up on Andrews. I mean, you shouldn't be radically changing your opinion of that many players through 9 games anyway.
sure.
So the fact that he looked so good at the end of last year, Chicago is going to play him. He qualifies at second and shortstop. I'd be willing to kick the tires on him and give him 2 or 3 weeks and see where it goes. I do have some Andrew shares. I'm not dropping him for anybody right now, again, because this position isn't particularly deep. If you can just take the middle, if you don't necessarily need a shortstop, Isaac Paredes is off to a good start for
Yeah,
the Rays. He hit 20 home runs, I think it was last year. He didn't have the greatest
yeah.
average. Now I know Tampa Bay's an interesting team, right? Because they're 9-0. But you could not have played an easier schedule than the Nationals, the
It's
Tigers,
true.
and the Oakland A's. This is like one of those
Rangers.
college basketball coaches who wants like the easiest schedule possible in November. I don't know how Tampa Bay got the schedule. Eventually, they're going to have to play the Yankees and the Blue
Yeah.
Jays, and then the Astros and the good teams in the American League. But look, they're awfully good anyway, and they have a lot of fantasy players that we're interested in. But maybe Isaac Paredes just needs to bump that average up a little bit. We know the power will play. He has multiple positions of coverage. His tag was actually a little bit lower than I expected. I think it might have been under 10%.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
he's somebody I'm rolling out in a 15-team league. We are Team Isaac. Me and my partner are throwing the Isaac double point text messages at each other. A nod to Isaac Washington, the Love Boat, which is dating myself. But yeah, Isaac Paredes is. I have room for him in the deeper leagues.
Colton Wong is off to a terrible start,
Mhm.
so maybe he's been dropped in some places. I still think he's going to end up doing what he usually does, like pretty boring. Maybe hits leadoff for the Mariners and gets you some nice counting stats. So that's not a bad option.
I like it.
Ha-Sung Kim with the
Mhm.
Padres too. Again, kind of boring profile fantasy wise, but when it's all said and done, he'll probably be double digit homers and steals and playing time safe. He qualifies all over. So you're not going to replace Oneil Cruz and what his upside is, but can you piece it together for a few months? I think it's certainly possible. And when I initially heard, fractured ankle for Cruz, I was like, oh, he's done for the year. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. Like maybe he'll be back in August, mid-August, something like that. So there's still some hope here in the later part of the season, but hopefully you can find some options to get you through to that time. And
Let me
you can,
present one other
yeah,
alternative. This is the two-way street. Okay, if your team has gotten off to a horrendous start with injuries, with underperformance, maybe if your league has say IL spots, but you already have your IL spots filled, maybe you trade Oneil Cruz to somebody, the guy who's in
mm,
first place in your league, who has everything going right, who has no IL spots filled, and
yeah,
you make a trade where it's like, look, I need to get better now. You can sit on this asset and hope Elno Cruz helps you for the final quarter of the season. Now, again, if you're after a great start, maybe you can give the guy who swoops in, makes a low ball offer, or just something you don't
mhm,
need off your bench, and think, well, if Oneil Cruz gives me anything down the stretch, then it's a bonus. I'm just trading somebody I wasn't going to use anyway. I have this open IL spot, so it may be a case where if you need immediate help, maybe I'm not saying give Oneil Cruz away. I wouldn't want to drop him, although in some leagues maybe you might have to, but you can always think about trading him if you need immediate help. And if you can if you're in a position to where you don't need the help right now, you don't have those IL spots filled, maybe he'd be somebody you could trade for on the cheap. I always think this way. This is kind of a fantasy football move where when fantasy football players get hurt for me, and again, I don't mean to treat these players like commodities. They're human beings. We're all O'Neill Cruz fans. He's a really fun player. He's the type of guy you could take if you had like an aunt or an uncle who didn't like baseball at all, and you took them to a Pirates game. You said, "Who's the young player they're excited about?" See if you can pick them out. They'd all pick out Oneil Cruz. I mean, he just
Oh,
jumps
no
off the
doubt.
page. He's an
Mhm.
exciting guy. He's a spectacle. I mean, he's capable of doing just about anything on a baseball field. Hit a home run 450 feet, break Statcast data. He's that kind of guy. But in
Yeah.
fantasy football, when players get hurt for me, a lot of times I'll just try to trade out of the injury and keep my roster healthy, keep my roster more immediate to helping me
Right.
in the moment and not worry about later on. So that's just a football strategy that you can maybe apply to baseball as needed.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this weekend, the kind of dichotomy between what makes a successful fantasy season or fantasy manager. Is it the team that's just the healthiest, over the course of the season? You could say that for like real baseball too. Like the healthiest teams usually are there at the end of the year. And I think you could say that for fantasy too. Maybe not necessarily like the shallow leagues. Like you can overcome injury. The replacement level on the waiver wire is there that if you get hit by injuries early, you still have a shot. But if you are in a deeper league where it's, or an NL only,
Mhm.
AL only type of league, if you lose one of these big time players, like that is devastating to get over. And some of that just comes down to dumb luck.
For sure. I say sometimes I phrase it this way. I don't think you need to be the luckiest manager in your league to win. But if you're the unluckiest manager in that particular season, you're not going to win. It's just, especially as you
Yes.
sain the deeper formats where there's no replacement level, there's no replacement value on the wire. You just if you lose the wrong couple of guys, you're just kind of sunk. But
Right.
that's why we play in multiple leagues, and that's why I think it wasn't that long ago where mixed leagues were kind of frowned upon. People like, oh, real fantasy is AL only or NL only. Well, first of all, whatever you want to play, that's fun for you. I encourage you to play it. But I
Sure.
think mixed leagues are fun because you have some replacement value because you have to know every team. You have to know all 30 teams. And I've been in AL only or NL only leagues where I've had injuries like, oh, I just lost the third baseman. Let's see what's on the wire. It's like, well, this guy had 4 at bats and this guy had 5 at bats. And this guy's a
Yes.
catcher, a backup catcher who qualifies at first base. I don't want any of these guys. None of them have any upside.
Right.
That's why I like the mixed leagues. And I like it's isn't it funny, DJ, that the difference between a 12-team mixed league and a 15-team mixed league, we talked about this a little bit in preseason. It's so radically different, right? The,
It
the,
is.
the FAAB markets are kind of crazy in 12-team and 15-team. It's a little bit more structured. It's a little bit more straight line, but you're fighting over. I'm never surprised in a 12-teamer when I got somebody well under market. Like, oh, I'll just throw out a token bid. I'll never win. Oh, wow, I won that guy. Where in the 15-team
Yes.
league, if somebody's interesting, I feel like you're fighting the whole room.
Exactly. No, it's very true, and especially as these injuries start to pile up. Adam Duvall is another one we saw over the weekend. Of course, he's been one of the big fantasy stars over the first 10 days or so, hitting 455, 4 homers, 14 RBIs, 11 runs scored, leading the league in slugging percentage. But all that came to a screeching halt on Sunday when Duvall rolled his left wrist, attempting to make a diving catch in center field. Duvall was sent for X-rays, but it's worth noting this is the same wrist which required season-ending surgery last July. The Red Sox have already dispatched Bobby Dahlbeck to meet the team in Tampa. We don't know the results of the X-rays yet, but from all indications and what the Red Sox are planning for, sounds like an extended absence for Duvall, which is definitely a bummer.
Yeah, shame. We talked a lot about him on this show. He's hit 30 home runs a number of times. He led the National League in RBIs just 2 seasons ago, and he looked
Mhm.
like I had a lot of FOMO for Duvall because it just seemed like
Yeah.
after the season started, like this is so obvious. This guy has a bat that's going to fit the park nicely. We know he has power. The batting average it's under what you'd want, but it's not so prohibitive that it's like he like kills your roster. I thought he was just a glaring ADP winner for people, and now that's
Yep.
felled by a wrist injury. And as you said, he has history with that wrist. And look, there any injury you're going to be concerned about, but when we think about wrist injury, you just think about that being something that can linger, or somebody comes back, the power doesn't come back right away. A lot of times, guys, I remember last year, Alex Bregman came off wrist surgery, and he really didn't hit for like 3 months of the year. So the
Yep.
problem now is not just how much time does Duvall miss, but what kind of player are we getting when he returns? This is just a shame because it seemed like anybody who drafted Duvall had an obvious winner, a guy who could have really
Yep.
smashed his ADP, and now died. This goes to show players don't try to make diving catches. We need you for the offense. I
Yeah.
smile, and you have to smile and whistle through the graveyard sometimes because it's just depressing. Adam Duvall looks like a big win, and now we have to replace him.
Certainly. Some couple of catcher developments here. Travis d'Arnaud landed on the injured list with a concussion over the weekend. There was a collision at home plate. He kind of lunged to catch a throw, and Rougned Odor appeared to, hit him with either his thigh or hip. But it was a pretty hard blow there, and it was actually the second collision that inning. Had one with Jake Cronenworth earlier, which wasn't nearly as severe. But d'Arnaud has had 3 previous concussions, so no reason to take a chance there. What's interesting about the Braves, they've had this luxury of 2 really solid catchers in the early part of the season, Sean Murphy as well, but that's actually led to Murphy being out of the lineup here and there so far this season. But now Murphy should see the bulk of the playing time for however long d'Arnaud is out. But given d'Arnaud's history, maybe it'll be a little longer than what we usually see. Hard to predict right now. You just hope d'Arnaud can get back out there. But I've seen a number of fantasy managers asking why Murphy isn't playing if he was such a big investment this offseason. So at least Murphy should be in the lineup on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I see Murphy 4 starts in the last 6 games, which honestly, with the exception of like the JT Real Mutos and the Will Smiths, I don't know how many catchers are going to play. Dalton Varsho's, not a catcher really anymore. I don't know how much more you can expect. I mean, I guess you'd like him to play 6 or 5 games. You get 4. Now that playing time will bump up to the point he's probably going to play 85 or 90% of the time. And the bat's good enough that maybe it plays as a DH when he's not behind the plate. But as you mentioned, d'Arnaud has this concussion history, so it's interesting to see what the timetable will be. The Braves kind of their tail between their legs. They got knocked around pretty good by the Padres in that 4-game series, showcasing some of their flaws. And this is a team I have winning the whole thing. I had them winning the World Series this year, but they didn't look great this week, and they lose d'Arnaud. And we know their Juan Grissom is now a long-term project for them. It didn't break the camp with the team. So the Braves. I still think, man, I wish I had Acuna anywhere I could. And, Olsen is, I think, going to be great this year. Austin Riley, the top 3 looks really good. But it's interesting how that offense all of a sudden looks a little bit top heavy. When I thought before the season 1-9, it was going to be a monster.
Yeah, totally agree. Staying in the NL East, we also saw Francisco Alvarez make his way back to the majors over the weekend after Omar Narvaez hit the injured list with a medium to high grade strain of his left calf. It's probably going to cost Narvaez like 2 months. Initially, Narvaez thought it was like a very minor thing before he went for the MRI. But it turns out that it's going to be a long-term absence. So Alvarez arrived sooner than we thought he would. Certainly more of a finished product offensively than he is behind the plate. We'll be interested to see how he works with this veteran staff. Verlander, Scherzer, but also Kodai Senga, his first season in the States. Maybe we see Tomas Nino paired with Senga more often than not. He's worked well with him so far. But still, if Alvarez is up, he's going to play a bunch, whether it's behind the plate or out of the DH spot, some sort of mix there. The Mets need Alvarez's bat, too, especially against left-handed pitching where they have been vulnerable over the past year and a half, really. They need another impact bat from the right side. The power potential as well. They're a little short on power. I don't know. I think in a 12-team mixed league, he's kind of fringy as a catcher, but it wouldn't shock me if in short order he's like a must start as a catcher. But I don't know. Off the bat, probably, I don't know. It's a judgment call to me.
Yeah, I struggled with that. I wrote a pickups column for Yahoo on Friday, and that coincided with this whole news breaking on Thursday. And I told my editor, Mauricio Castillo, I said, I'm going to put Alvarez in here, but I don't make it clear. I'm not banging the table saying everybody has to add him because I don't know how quickly he obviously didn't play. Alvarez didn't play Friday or Saturday. And we know the defensive, it's not just that he's finished product offensively and he's not a finished product defensively, but he plays one of the few positions on defense that everybody cares about, right? I mean, if you can hit, if he were just like a left fielder or something, they'd live with this defense, right? But if you can't play reliable defense at catcher, that's a problem. And the pitchers aren't going to like that. And that's something the team has to consider. So I'm curious to see, and you know the Mets closer than I do, just is he profiled as somebody who's going to stay a catcher? Is he somebody who's eventually going to be a DH or a first baseman? How much of a deficiency do you think he is behind the plate? Also, I want to mention, there are several formats where Alvarez is utility only, and Yahoo is one of those
Yeah.
formats because it's based on once a player comes up into the majors and plays some games, that determines his positional eligibility for the next season. Now, the good news is Alvarez only needs 5 starts in season, or maybe it's 5 appearances, 5 games played in season at catcher to get the tag. So for everybody who's bombing me on Twitter saying, well, how come he's not a catcher eligible? He will be in about a week or so. It's not going to take a long time. But I don't. It's just weird that a player with this kind of offensive profile comes up, and usually it's like, okay, man, we're all pounding the table for it. I don't know how much he's going to play. Not that he's going to play once a week. I don't mean that, but I could see it being 50-50. Or I could even see him being getting 3 starts in a 7-game week. And I'd be careful with this one. I did pick him up in one league just for FOMO reasons. Like, well, if he goes nuts, at least I got him one team. But in other leagues where I could have made a 2-handed shove, I didn't do it.
I think Nito's going to play a lot behind the plate. Because especially this year where base runners are, running like crazy. The Marlins stole 5 bases yesterday with Alvarez behind the plate. Alvarez has a good arm, so that's not really the issue. It's just a lot easier to run these days than it's been in the past. And we'll see. I don't think the Mets are in any way. I wouldn't say in any way, but they know he's 21 years old. He's still learning. It's not to say that he can't stick there. But Nito is so good defensively and works really well with these pitchers. He's going to play. I think that Alvarez will probably split his time between catcher and the DH spot, maybe evenly. He'll make 2 or 3 starts a week behind the plate, 2 or 3 starts, in the DH spot. Tommy Pham's still there who could DH as well. Daniel Vogelback is still there too. He's going to DH a lot. So it's not a slam dunk. He's going to be in the lineup every day. So yeah, I would say in a 12-team mixer, you can maybe wait and see. I have a feeling that you might be a little bit disappointed on a daily basis that he might not be on the lineup card. But let's get into some of these hot starts that we have seen. Again, just a week and a half into the season, so we don't want to overreact. But Wander Franco definitely giving me FOMO right now. Hitting 351, 4 homers, 9 RBIs. Again, the competition, not great, but reminding us all why just about a year ago, we were like, he could be an MVP candidate. Matt Chapman, 475, 2 homers, 14 RBIs. Brian Reynolds, 405, 5 homers, 14 RBIs. And I want to mention Jordan Walker here too. 9-game hitting streak to begin his career, hitting 353, 2 homers, 8 RBIs. So out of these 4, Franco, Chapman, Reynolds, Walker, who do you wish you would have more coverage of on your rosters?
It's definitely the first and the last guy you mentioned, Franco and Walker, who are both going to check that same box, right? At one point, Franco was the highest regarded prospect in baseball, and Walker was certainly high up on the prospect list, and he announced his potential in spring training. And it was interesting when a guy like Walker comes up, 20 years old, we know the way teams usually handle these things. If Walker had gotten off to a really poor start, he was 3 for 37 or something, it just gives the team an excuse to say, okay, he needs some seasoning, he's putting pressure on himself, let's send him down to AAA and let him go bang up things there. Because he's off to such a good start, and man, he looks the part too. I talked about how Oneil Cruz, you can just identify him even if you knew nothing about baseball. I think Jordan Walker's that type of guy too. Now I'm thinking, when does he move up in the lineup? I know the Cardinals have a deep lineup, but Jordan Walker's not made to bat 8th all season. I think eventually that's going to correct itself. In the case of Franco, and then we talked about they played 3 really weak teams, but whatever. You still get to hit the ball. It's not like everybody else, bats 400 against those guys. The question with Franco has always been category juice. It's like, well, okay, maybe he'll win a batting title, but how many home runs are you getting? Is he interested in running? I know his 2 steals came early in the season. He hasn't run much lately, although you don't run a lot when you hit home runs. And I think he has 3 home runs in his last 4 games. I don't think I have Franco anywhere, and that's killing me because it looks like. And again, I talked about the infield being, shortstop maybe being a deeper position in the preseason. So a lot of times I just saw guys at different price points that made more sense to me. And now I'm thinking, I think I missed the boat on Franco. I want to mention on Chapman, still doesn't turn 30 until the end of this month. And he's always been a guy who had power, and the batting average would be like in the 235, 245 range. I think his career average is 243 or something like that. We know he's got that great defense. I've always liked Chapman. He's a guy I didn't draft because it just seemed like other third basemen around his price I liked more. And again, I don't want to radically change my opinion of Matt Chapman from 9 games, but he's just a good baseball player. who I could easily see. When your career average is 243, that means everybody's afraid. Oh no, what if he hits 225? Well, what if he hits 255 or 260? That's in
Mhm.
the range of reasonable outcomes too. We know the
Yep.
power is going to play. We know he's in a good lineup. So I wish I had some Chapman. The case of Brian Reynolds, I wonder, what do you think the odds are that he's a Pirate on August 1st? 50-50, 60-40? I mean, he's somebody who they've looked to extend long term. I'm not sure if he's interested in staying in Pittsburgh. Obviously, every player is competitive. At some point, maybe they want to go to a contender. He's their most interesting trade piece. So I wonder if he's on a different team in the middle of the year. Actually, we were trying to make a trade for Reynolds. We were offering Dansby Swanson to a team that really likes Dansby Swanson. But unfortunately, Reynolds has gotten off to such a hot start. They're just putting two
Yeah.
hands around Reynolds. They don't want to move him. But I'm just curious how much longer he's on the Pirates.
So the latest reporting here on Reynolds was that there was contract negotiations up until opening day.
Mhm.
The sort of snag was that Reynolds wanted an opt out, and the Pirates kind of, you know, that was the end of that. That's kind of the holdup as far as it currently stands. It seems like negotiations are still happening, so maybe they still agree to an extension in season. That usually don't see a lot of that, so I wonder if it starts to cool a bit here. But I think the hot start that Reynolds has been off to might just underscore to the Pirates, and especially with the O'Neil Cruz injury, like, hey, let's give the fans like something to be excited about. So we'll
Mhm.
see. Reynolds actually has the highest barrel rate among qualified hitters right now, 29.3%. So pretty much everything he's hitting is a rocket right now. Matt Chapman is actually second at 25%. So they're earning what they're doing so far. But you're right. I think I'd rather have Wander Franco too. And I think the way my drafts unfolded, at least as far as I remember right now, I have way too many teams, so I can't remember. But I think what if I didn't get a shortstop early, the first like 5 rounds or so, I waited a long time. So that would usually skip over Franco, who wasn't giving me a lot of category juice. I didn't think there was a ton of separation between like a Franco and a Nico Horner, who would still give me steals and double digit homers. So I probably skipped over Franco in a lot of leagues and didn't get a lot of coverage there. So I do maybe wish I had had him at least somewhere. So lesson learned there with Franco. Let's go to some pitchers who are on the rise here, and we've talked about Kodai Senga. Had another really good start this weekend against the Marlins. Nick Lodolo dominated against the Phillies on Saturday. Unfortunately, the Reds blew the win for him against the Phillies in the ninth. Chris Bubich dominated the Giants on Sunday, like ridiculous numbers here. 9 strikeouts, no walks, over 6 scoreless innings, allowed just 2 hits, 19 whiffs, led the league in whiffs on Sunday. I don't think you would have guessed that one. Also had a really good start against the Blue Jays in his season debut. Sonny Gray struck out a career high 13 batters against the Astros on Friday. Maybe the Astros aren't as fearsome as they have been in the past, but still very impressive outing. Seth Lugo had another good start against the Braves on Sunday. Bunch of names here I'm throwing at you, Scott, but of these names, which one is kind of raising the profile for you, and maybe you would have bumped up a bit more? Again, we're only seeing like 2 starts from these guys, but I think we have some data from these starts to start to make some takeaways from this.
I got to be honest. I mean, if I were walking into a draft today, I'd have all of them ranked higher than I would have 2 or 3 weeks ago. You think
Yeah.
of Senga, when you look at a Japanese player, somebody who didn't play in MLB, especially somebody who comes from a different culture, right? You think about how quickly do they adjust, how quickly do they become familiar in their surroundings and get used to the different things, the different shape of the game, the different size of the ball, and all that stuff. And when a player like Senga, who had the pedigree and who got the contract that he did, when he pitches as well as he has for 2 games, like, oh, wow, Senga's legit. Man, did the Mets need him with Verlander hurt? Scherzer had a poor start to the season. So he's really stepped up. And as you mentioned, I would not be surprised if Nito becomes his personal catcher because they work well together. But
Mhm.
he's somebody who I would draft proactively for sure. And I'm wondering, I like Hunter Green a lot, but maybe
Yeah.
Nick Lodolo. Maybe Nick Lodolo is going to be the ace of the staff eventually. I think they're a 1 and 1A. And
Yeah.
what do you look for? What makes a dominant pitcher? We're looking at strikeouts. We're looking at swings and misses. And Lodolo, he's a guy who, if he just has to come over the heart of the plate with his stuff and say, "Here it is, hit it," he can do that. He throws that hard. He's got that much movement. He's somebody really fun. It's frustrating, as you mentioned, he lost the game on Saturday when the bullpen gave it away, but he's been dominant, and I'm thrilled I have at least one share of him. I wish I had more of it. In the case of Bubic, I had a chance to stream him in a head-to-head game where I desperately needed a win or some strikeouts on the weekend, and I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. And then he pitched great, and it really stung me. I didn't get a chance to see much of it. So if you have some background on Bubic, I'm interested to see it. But again, the strikeouts were there. It's hard to get behind the Royals. They're one of the weakest teams in baseball, but I'm open-minded that maybe I was wrong on him. With Seth Lugo, we've always wanted to see what he could do as a starter. He's got good infrastructure in San Diego. I like the offense. I think he'll be supported by a decent defensive team. The bullpen looks good with Josh Hader off to a good start. I was kind of nervous about Hader into the season. It seems like that's kind of a mistake that I should regret now. But it's funny, too. Somebody actually asked me a question. They said, Seth Lugo, he's still in the rotation, right? And before I had a chance to answer it, Seth Lugo's mom actually chimed in with, yes, he's still in the rotation. I said, well, that's the best source I got. I can't top Seth Lugo's mom. So encouraging to see him get off to a good start. Again, I would take a Lugo over a Bubic, say, because I want to invest on the better team, right? I want the better infrastructure. That's a big thing to me.
Yeah.
So if some people may be making a choice between guys like that, I'm always going to lean towards that better team. But Lugo's always had the knockout stats and relief. We know that doesn't translate. Starting is a different thing. You have to pace yourself a little bit. You're going to go around the order maybe 3 times, but I like what I've seen from Lugo so far.
And Lugo has the arsenal too. He was never your typical reliever. Like, he had it. If he wanted to tap into it, it was there. And he's always wanted this opportunity. So, let's see if he runs with it. Certainly with Joe Musgrove, got pushed back his rehab start. Not a huge setback or anything. I think it's a very minor thing, like his back or something. So, but still, that buys another week for the Padres to sort all this out. So we'll see. Michael Wacha had a good start. Like, they have options in this rotation. So there might be some time, and especially with a guy like Lugo, who hasn't thrown a ton of innings, there might be a stretch where he's back in the bullpen. We'll see. Injuries always sort things out too, but something to watch there with Lugo. Bubic is just a different pitcher right now. The velocity is up a tick from last season so far. The changeup is looking really good as well, with some different movement on it, different shape of these pitches. He's also throwing a new slider, which looks really good as well. It's early, so sometimes we see these kind of velocity surgers. It starts to go down a little bit. We'll see if he can hold all this right now. He also has the Braves up next. So even if you pick him up off waivers, are you starting him against the Braves? I'm not sure. You know what I mean? But is he someone maybe, it's a speculative ad and kind of see where this goes? Maybe. Bubic is only rostered in 7% of Yahoo League, so he's basically free if you want to take a shot. Let's say you've been frustrated with Carlos Carrasco, speaking from the Mets perspective, his velocity's way down. And is this just one of those things where he's building arm strength, or is he hurt? Who knows? But if you're frustrated enough, I could see maybe swapping Carrasco out for Bubic and kind of see where this leads. So
yeah, I could see that too. You mentioned the changeup too. I always love when I hear a pitcher is being successful with this changeup, because that means you have a way to get out batters with the platoon disadvantage, right? That's always a struggle. That's a big difference between why some guy may be a starter, some guy might be a reliever, or some guy might be a 4 or 5 starter, some guy might be somebody who would start a playoff game. Can you get the opposite-handed batters out? And a changeup is a great way to do that.
So we're going to get to some FAAB bids from the weekend. Before we do, remember, download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today. So FAAB bids over the weekend. I was kind of all over the place here. I definitely had some big bids out. Didn't get everyone, but I did get Matt Vierling in Tout Wars. Last week was Trace Thompson. Didn't really do much over the past week. I still have him on my roster, but I got Matt Vierling. I'm still looking for that extra outfield help. I think he can. There's some category juice there. Got him in Tout Wars. Got him in TGFBI. I think the most interesting thing, and there's a bunch of TGFBI leagues out there, but Grayson Rodriguez was a free agent in my TGFBI league. We have $1,000 budget in FAAB for this league. Grayson Rodriguez went for 444, almost 50% of this manager's budget. Chris Bubich went for 102. Brian Anderson went for 84. I got Brian Bayo for 40, and I stated my case on Bayo last week. So Grayson Rodriguez for 444, Brian Bayo for 40. So I was pretty thrilled about that. It's probably going to be another week before we see Bayo up in the majors, and you don't have IL spots in TGFBI. So waiting on a pitcher like this can be a little bit tough. But I was happy to get Bayo in that league, and we'll see where that leads. Any interesting stuff in your league, Scott?
Yeah, let me first touch on Grayson Rodriguez. This underscores to me the importance of trying to buy at the bottom of the market as opposed to the top of the market, to try to hold a player like that. Now, granted, you weren't sure if somebody would get hurt in Baltimore. It's still not even clear if he's with the team long term. He could,
True.
as crazy as it sounds, he could still be in the minors in a couple of weeks. But obviously in a 15-team league, you want to win, you want to be aggressive. I get why people were doing the two-handed shove on Rodriguez. There's no question about the talent, but it's the idea that you want to get him at your price, not at the market price, which is I fell into the market price problem in Labor 15-team mixed league where the best player by far was Brian Anderson, who I wish I had picked up a week earlier. I was shocked nobody picked him up. So that's in that league, the cap is $100 and there's no $0 bids. Like in TGFBI, there's no $0 bids.
Right.
So you have a limited amount of resource. I decided to push 15. It turns out nobody else went into double digits. I think 8 or 9 might have been. A lot of people bid on him, but only 7, 8, 9, a couple of lower bids. So mixed feelings. I wanted Anderson. He fits on my team. He qualifies a couple different positions. I know we talked about him last week, but I wish I had the sense to maybe bid 10 or 11. It would have saved a few dollars, which matters there.
Right.
A player I picked up in one league who's 19% rostered in Yahoo is Trevor Larnach, who's playing a lot for the Twins. He's a guy who is first, second, third against all right-handed pitching. I think he's batting leadoff today, and he's still just 26. He's a first-round pick. He was somebody who's had injury problems the last couple of years. I could see him maybe being just one of those sneaky late developing players. I'm surprised his roster tag isn't a little bit higher. Now, a player who's close to 50% in Yahoo, a guy who I was drafting late in a lot of leagues, and then sometimes when I saw something shinier, I dropped him, was Anthony DeSclafani. Last year, season ruined by an ankle injury. He's healthy now. The Giants have done that pitching voodoo thing so many times in the past. DeSclafani 2 years ago was really good. He's had a couple of good starts. In one of my hometown leagues where the top bid you can make in any week is $30. That's $30 of real money. One of the good players in our league pushed the 30, and I kind of wish, man, I thought Disco was on our team. You talk about being in a lot of leagues. I'm still trying to figure out who I have where and everything. I'm not sure if I realized DeSclafani was available in that league, but there's a missed opportunity because I feel like he already should have been on my roster.
Yeah, it's interesting in my NL only labor league. So I did bid on Nelson Cruz over the weekend. He was still out there, surprisingly. He went for 15 though. So I had to get my fall back here, and I was missing. Derek Hall got hurt. We hadn't talked about this on this show, but he tore a thumb ligament. He's going to be out for a couple of months. The Phillies are actually moving Alec Bohm to first base for a while. He's going to get the primary at bats there at first base against the right-handers. We're going to see Edmundo Sosa at third base. I think that's the right call, like defensively for this infield, and they'll reevaluate over time. I ended up getting Tim LeCastro for $1, which I'm okay with because when Tim LeCastro enters a game, he's going to run. Like, he's going to try to steal some bases. So even if I'm not getting a lot of at-bats out of that spot, he still could maybe give me a little bit of value, around the fringes of my roster. So that's the kind of stuff you have to do in an NL only or AL only league to extract value. I was actually kind of happy with that one.
Yeah, I can see that. Like a poor man's John Birdie. And if you're in a mixed league, be careful with Nelson Cruz because it looks like right now he's just going to play against left-handed pitching. I realize why you would want him in an NL only league, but I'm not sure he carries mixed league value right now.
Right. Yep. And Rodolfo Castro was a good pickup in NL only as well. If you jumped on that made a lot of sense. I'm trying to see who actually got him here. He did go for. Wait, he might already be rostered actually. But yeah, we talked about it earlier with Oneil Cruz. I think if you're in a deeper mixed, I think Rodolfo Castro is a pretty solid pickup. So, and he qualified. I think right now he qualifies at second base and third base, so it might be a little while for Castro to get that shortstop eligibility, but certainly valuable in a deeper mixed league. So Scott, Wednesday's show, we will cover waiver wire pickups out there. Our waiver wire Wednesday show. You got tested on our pitch clock for the first time on Wednesday. This time it'll be my turn, and you get to make the pick. So I look forward to seeing how that turns out.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. Turning the tables on you, and obviously waiver wire work is a fundamental part of fantasy success. So we'll try to get you set up on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Make sure to subscribe to Circling the Bases wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to rate and review if you like what you're hearing. Follow us on Twitter if you don't already. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski on Twitter. I'm at DJ Short. Take care. We'll see you next time.